Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about something I find most interesting. Mushoku Tensei episode 16 was much different in the manga than it is in the anime or even the light novel. And today we're going to discuss just that. It's also worth noting that the manga is not the source material. This video is simply meant for science. Nothing more. I also wouldn't have known about this unless my viewers didn't tell me, so a big thanks to you guys for filling me in. And stick around until the end and I'll tell you my theory on why there was such a big change and which version of Paul and Rudy's fight that I enjoy the most. Let's go! Firstly, the whole setup for this scene is actually very different in the manga. The underwear that Rudy gets, seemingly at random in the anime, is actually given to him by Geese, aka the new guy. This is actually the smallest change of the scene, though it has massive implications and surprisingly is connected to Rudy confronting Paul. In the manga, Paul simply shows up and confronts Rudy pretty much immediately, and wanting to not reveal his identity, Rudy puts on the underwear. That's his reasoning. But in the anime, Rudy finds a pair of dirty underwear and puts them on his head and uses the name of Ruijerd to spread the good word about his fellow man. Rudy's reaction to Paul is different as well. He's excited to see his father again and remembers all of the fond memories he had as a kid living with Paul in Zenith. Unsurprisingly, the differences keep piling up. Rudy makes mention of how Paul is drunk, where he seems more famished and sick in the anime. Rudy also makes mention of how Paul is never that drunk and he's visibly worried about Paul's haggard state. This reminds Rudy of his father, who was a drunkard that abused the drink, which he then has to shake out of his head. Even the reaction that he expected from Paul, which is basically for him to hold him tight and joyously proclaim he's glad that Rudy's safe, he doesn't get that. Instead, he just gets a, "Oh, well, I'm glad you're alive" kind of reaction. Which, boy howdy, that's rough. Knowing what Rudy has gone through thus far, I'd be sad too. What's even more fascinating is that the fight between Paul and Rudy is so different that I came away from the manga version with a totally different opinion. The scene that follows is much more black and white for both Rudy and Paul, with a lot to blame that could be put on both of them. Paul sent out messages to every guild, yet Rudy didn't read any of them as he was too busy adventuring. You can see on his face the realization set in for Rudy that he messed up. And compared to the anime, the manga shows, in my opinion, a much more heavy look on Rudy. This is when the bikini warrior, as I dub her, comes in and tells Paul to stop berating Rudy as he's only a child. This is when Rudy first meets this girl, not like how it was in the anime where Rudy sniffed and licked the dirty underwear, leading to her to call Rudy and I quote, an enemy of all women. That scene, in comparison to what the manga presents, makes Rudy look perverted and somewhat immature in a lazy way. That's just my opinion though. Rudy, seeing her, then comments on how Paul is probably sleeping around again on Zenith now that she's out of the picture. What's so different here is that while the trigger is the same, the bikini warrior, Rudy's inner thoughts, suggests that he couldn't stop what he was saying. Almost as if out of rage, the thoughts kept flowing out of him into words. Though he doesn't want to say them at all, he does, which in turn triggers Paul to fight Rudy. Now this is where we have one of the first really big major differences and probably one of the reasons why the manga as a whole is not as beloved as the light novel. This fight in the manga really isn't a fight at all. Paul is so drunk that Rudy doesn't even need to use his eye to fight him, when in the anime, he uses the eye. This leads to Rudy taking the advantage and pinning him on the ground, punching him repeatedly. While this is happening, Rudy monologues about how hard he tried and how he feels Paul doesn't understand what he had to go through. He just wants Paul to understand that he was alone and had no clue what to do, and that the only thing he could do was really just hopefully protect Eris and get back alive. This is where Norn comes in with a beautiful piece of art that blew me away. These panels are so interesting as Rudy's inner monologue suggests that he's jealous because this is the exact way that Rudy thought Paul would greet him. Then, as Paul says something spoiler related to Rudy that I won't spoil for anime onlys like myself, even though I've kind of spoiled myself on this, Paul tells Rudy that he thought he got the messages, prompting his reaction earlier, though the damage is already done. Rudy with a horrifying look on his face as if his heart has just been shattered into 1,000 pieces, runs away. While it's probably unpopular to say, I think we should give the manga version its roses here with this scene, because I think the manga version of this scene is, in my opinion, one of the few changes that the Mushoku Tensei manga adaptation probably gets right thus far, just in terms of looking at it from its own thing. Not only did the misunderstanding portray both Rudy and Paul in morally gray positions, same as the light novel source, but as well it gave us insight into how both characters work. Paul is shaken up and mentally doing poorly with Zenith and his other child being gone, and due to this relies on drinking to get through what he's feeling. In other words, Paul is self-medicating. While some of this is my theory applied to it, Rudy seems to be shaken and through this interaction with Paul experiences trauma from his past life. When he sees Paul drunk in a, drunken state, he's reminded of his old father and how he treated him. This later piles on when he sees Norn and Paul interact in the way he yearned for his first meeting with Paul to go again. This brilliantly builds up to Rudy running from Paul and the misunderstanding that just happened to be put in place. So the real question is, do I think they should have adapted this over what the anime did? Well, I think the answer isn't quite as simple as yes or no. Maybe overall, probably not, as the manga adaptation of Mushoku Tensei isn't really liked by the community, and understandably so, but while I quite enjoyed the scene in the anime as an anime only, and just in general thought it was really good, and to be fair to the manga as well, it had a beautiful art and presentation for the scene in terms of its writing and story, I think it's a tough call, but I'm actually leaning into the manga with like 51% confidence here, maybe even less, like 50.01% here. It's really hard to say. And to be honest, on any given day, if you ask me, I may flip-flop. So I guess we could just say 50-50 here. It seems I'm not alone either. There were plenty of comments in my most recent Mushoku Tensei video that suggests many manga readers wished we had gotten this rather than what the anime presented to them. I think that the whole scene in the anime with the underwear sniffing / licking and Bikini Warriors lines of enemy of all women, that was kind of cheesy and, at least for my taste, pretty much unneeded. And it unnecessarily made Rudy creepy as well and look like a total goofball when he's kind of supposed to be our hero here. The fight itself with Rudy and Paul, I think, is pretty much just as interesting as what it is in the anime when it especially comes to facial expressions and reactions. Though I do admit that the anime, when it comes to facial expressions, ain't no slouch either. But that's why it makes it so difficult to pick, really, on any given day, which one's better. Besides the underwear sniffing stuff, the anime's version is just really good in its own way, and the same thing could be said for the manga. Though, on a personal and subjective note, I think I like the character and expression detail of the manga, which probably puts me over the edge, at least for this video, but only just by a minuscule amount. Of course, I have a lot of Mushoku Tensei fans probably watching this video, so I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below, especially if you're an anime only. What do you prefer, the anime or the manga or the light novel? Which of these three do you think is both the best, but as well, which one do you just prefer in your own personal opinion? Now, why did they change things going from the light novel to the manga adaptation? Well, I don't know if there is an explanation for this quite yet from any of the staff or not, but this is a very simple and most likely explanation. To have better pacing and a better viewing experience as a manga, the writers of this series probably just decided to rewrite the scene and its presentation to fit the manga reader's expectations. Remember, at the end of the day, this is just an adaptation, and because of that, most audiences maybe will not have seen the light novel or probably even read light novels in general. It's a very common practice though, but we'll just have to wait and see, as I could be wrong. While we wait for episode 17 to drop, why not check out my reaction to the Paul and Rudy fight from the anime, which is more closely based off the source material. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.